The world of Five Nights at Freddy's has been around for just over a decade. And while most fans know the basics, like Freddy as the mascot or Springtrap as one of the series' most infamous villains, there are countless hidden details that slip past even long-time players. These details are scattered across the main games, spin-offs, source code, and the cryptic teasers Scott Cawthon left behind for the community to uncover. Each one gives us a different angle on the series, showing just how deep and strange its history really is. So tonight, let's take a slow, quiet dive into the overlooked corners of FNAF's universe and uncover stories that often go unnoticed. In the very first game, there is a rare chance that the posters in the East Hall are replaced with eerie drawings of crying children. The style is crude, almost like a child's sketch, and their stretched expressions resemble Edvard Munch's famous painting, The Scream. What makes this detail even more unsettling is how closely the drawings resemble the puppet, hinting at its presence long before it was introduced. Hidden images like this were never explained, but they helped plant the series' tone of mystery right from the beginning. Among the most famous secrets is Golden Freddy, who appears if the poster in the West Hall changes to a close-up of his face. What many players don't realize is just how rare this moment is coded to be. The chance of seeing it is 1 in 10,000, which is why many fans originally thought he was a myth. But when he does appear, the game itself can crash, creating one of the most iconic Easter eggs in horror gaming. And before we continue, if you're enjoying this quiet dive through FNAF's hidden details, I'd like to gently ask you to consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps more than you know, and it lets me keep making these long, relaxing videos for you to fall asleep to. Development of the first game also left behind unused materials. One image shows Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica all staring directly into the camera from the stage at once. It was never programmed to appear in gameplay, but players who data mined the files found it hidden away. Over time, this image has become infamous in its own right, almost like a ghost photo of a moment that was meant to haunt the player, but was cut before release. Small mistakes and quirks in the files give us glimpses of the game's rough edges. In early versions of the first game's newspaper, the word pizzeria was actually spelled incorrectly as pizzeria. It was quietly corrected later, but screenshots of the mistake remain. Even small slips like this remind us how FNAF began as a small indie project before growing into the massive franchise it is. Today, the map of the first game also had an earlier version that didn't make it to release. Instead of the simple static layout, some camera icons actually had cone-shaped fields of vision, as if the cameras were meant to give directional coverage. This feature was dropped, leaving the cameras as fixed points instead. But it shows how the security system was being shaped in the final weeks before launch. Cut content continued in later titles. FNAF World included a fully composed track called Ice Cave that was never used. The music suggested a frosty environment, hinting that an entire area may have been cut before the game shipped. To this day, fans can only listen to the track outside of the game, imagining what that icy stage might have looked like. In sister location, early concepts show that Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy once had each other's colors. Freddy was pink while Foxy was purple. Their palettes were swapped late in production, leading to the versions players recognize now. Early designs also lacked features like Freddy's chest speaker and Bonbon Puppet. These were only added later, giving him the distinct look that fans remember. Even the smallest quirks have fascinated players. Nightmare Fredbear has mismatched buttons, depending on where you see him. In gameplay, both buttons are black, but in the extras menu, one button is black and the other is white. Whether this was a lighting mistake or an intentional oddity, it adds another strange layer to a character already surrounded by mystery. Unused mechanics can also be found hidden in the code. Special Delivery contains an effect called Visibility Alter that was never activated. It appears to have been designed to make animatronics appear differently depending on how close you were, flickering in and out almost like ghosts. No one knows exactly how it would have worked, but the presence of the mechanic has fueled speculation about how much scarier encounters could have been. Other secrets are buried in teasers. When Scott uploaded the first sister location teaser, hidden code in the website could be decoded and rearranged into what looked like a schedule for the Funtime animatronics, along with a mysterious fifth character. This never appeared in the final game, but it suggested a rental system for the Funtimes, as if families could order them for parties. That mechanic was cut, though hints of it remain in the game's lore. Scott's websites have been filled with other hidden clues. For a time, if you brightened the background of certain teasers, you could find fragments of text, abbreviated phrases like Afton Robotics Inc. and Chica's Party World. While some of these were later confirmed, others like Criminal Institute still remain unexplained, suggesting stories that were planned but never revealed. Not all secrets are in files or teasers. Some appear right in gameplay. In the original sister location, if you entered the code 1983 on the keypad in the private room, the monitors would show scenes from FNAF 4, the bedroom and Plushtrap's hallway. This small connection tied two games together, hinting that the nightmare sequences may not have been dreams at all. Music also hides its own curiosities. Freddy's music box theme is a rendition of the Toreador March from Bizet's opera Carmen. In the original context, the piece is sung by a bullfighter boasting of fame and glory. Within the world of FNAF, the song takes on an eerie double meaning, as if Freddy is celebrating a twisted kind of victory whenever the tune plays. The animatronics themselves hold countless unused details. In early renders of the Phantoms for FNAF 3, Phantom Mangle's wires hung upwards instead of down, defying gravity. While this is often dismissed as a modelling error, some fans interpret it as a deliberate choice to emphasize their ghostly, hallucination-like nature. FNAF has also reused assets in surprising ways. Michael Afton's shadow in Sister Location's True Ending was created using a blacked-out image of real-world singer Rick Astley. The silhouette was never meant to be noticed, but players who brightened the image uncovered the strange reuse, adding yet another oddity to the game's history. Even the official books reveal quirks. When the Freddy Files Updated Edition was released, it was heavily criticized for including fan-made renders instead of official assets, along with several factual errors in its coverage of Ultimate Custom Night. After backlash, the digital release was corrected with official images, but one error, a misplaced Springtrap head, remains to this day. Glitchtrap is one of the few characters with two official names. While his original introduction gave him his digital-sounding title, Steelwool Studios later approved the use of his fan nickname Malhair, making both names canon. It's rare for the community's own invention to become officially recognized, but Glitchtrap is one of the exceptions. And then there's the strange history of Scott's teasers. At one point, 2 darker teasers for FNAF World were uploaded to his site. One showed Adventure Mangle hanging limply with the phrase, "See what you've all done," while the other depicted Ballboy's face with the words, "Madness takes many forms." Both teasers were hidden when brightened, and both were removed soon after, sparking controversy over whether they were too grim for the game's tone. Even real-world trivia adds to the series' strange charm. Freddy's laugh is actually a slowed-down recording of a little girl's laugh. In-game, it sounds deep and menacing, but when sped back up, the original child's voice is clear. Fans have connected this to the theory that Freddy is possessed by the spirit of a child, though the technical origin is much simpler. Everywhere you look, FNAF hides details. The phrase "It's me" appears in countless places, from posters in the first game to cutscenes in FNAF 2, and even as a dartboard Easter egg in Curse of Dreadbear. Over time, the phrase has become tied almost exclusively to Golden Freddy, reinforcing his role as one of the most enigmatic figures in the series. Even something as small as pressing Freddy's nose has become a recurring joke. Beginning in the first game, clicking Freddy's nose on the showstage poster creates a honking sound. The tradition has carried into nearly every mainline entry, sometimes through plush toys, sometimes through menu icons, always reminding players that even in a game filled with dread, there's room for a small laugh. While most players remember the core gameplay of closing doors and checking cameras, the first game still hides small, atmospheric touches that are easy to overlook. If you listen closely in the kitchen, where the camera feed is disabled, you can sometimes hear clattering pans and muffled voices. The idea that something unseen is making noise in a room you can't check visually is one of the subtlest tricks the game uses to raise tension without ever showing a thing. Bonnie, in particular, carries his own quiet detail. On extremely rare occasions, when he lingers near the office, you can hear a faint groan, as if the suit itself is straining to breathe. It only happens in a handful of situations and was never explained, leading many fans to debate whether it was a glitch or a hidden feature. Either way, the sound has become one of the rarest audio oddities in the series. The sequel, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, added more animatronics than any other entry, and with it came even stranger secrets. Hidden in the files of the game is a sprite of a skull with black fluid dripping from one eye. The file is simply labelled Mike, which many interpret as a reference to the original security guard, Mike Schmidt. No one knows if the sprite was part of a scrapped minigame or just a leftover test image, but its existence adds another mystery tied to the guard's identity. The same game also introduced JJ, who rarely appears under the desk with only her face visible. Unlike other secret characters, she has no direct impact on gameplay. She simply stares and then vanishes. What makes her so peculiar is that her existence was never mentioned by Scott in any official material, leaving it entirely up to the community to document her presence. Another overlooked oddity comes from the Paper Pals. They appear as decorations on a wall, but on rare occasions, one of the paper cutouts actually disappears, only to later reappear inside your office. Because they're just drawings, players debated whether this was a bug or an intentional secret. Over time, the Paper Pals have taken on a strange cult status, with theories suggesting they might represent the restless spirits of children in their simplest form. FNAF 3 leaned heavily on hallucinations, and with them came some of the most unpredictable moments in the series. At the start of a night, there is an extremely slim chance that you'll be immediately jump-scared by a phantom animatronic, sometimes within seconds of the clock ticking over. This can happen before you even bring up the monitor, making it one of the few true surprise moments in the game's design. Hidden in the same game is a quirk with Phantom Mangle's teaser art. When brightened, players discovered a faint number 10 written in the corner of the image. It was later revealed that Scott had originally planned a countdown of 10 teasers leading up to FNAF 3's release. But because he chose to release the game early, the countdown was cut short, leaving the Phantom teaser as the only public trace of that plan. The series' use of sound design remains one of its most subtle strengths. Freddy's laugh, which many believe to be a deep robotic growl, is actually a slowed-down sample of a little girl's laugh. Restoring the sample to its original speed reveals a normal child's giggle, stripped of its menace. This discovery reinforced the theory that Freddy is possessed by a child's spirit, but it also highlights the creative sound design that makes the game so unsettling. When Sister Location arrived, it broke the formula by moving away from static cameras and into a facility filled with interactive rooms. What many players missed is that the layout of the underground facility mirrors several areas from FNAF 4. The Ballora Gallery's lower halls resemble Plushtrap's long corridor. The Circus Gallery lines up with the minigame diner, and the private room shares features with the crying child's bedroom. These visual echoes strongly suggest that the nightmares of FNAF 4 weren't just dreams, but connected to a physical place that existed beneath the surface. Even Ballora herself holds unexplained details. Her blueprints confirm that she is blind, relying on audio sensors to locate her targets. But in Sister Location's custom night, she still somehow finds the player in the private room, despite there being no sound to track and her eyes being closed. This contradiction has never been resolved, leaving the unsettling question of how exactly she knows you're there. Ultimate Custom Night expanded the series into a surreal mix of mechanics and lore, But it also carried its own strange Easter eggs. If Golden Freddy is set to 1 and every other animatronic is set to 0, and you purchase the death coin, using it on Golden Freddy will summon Fredbear instead. For years, Fredbear had been an entity confined to lore and minigames, so seeing him appear in a modern jump scare felt like a direct bridge between the earliest tragedy and the game's final lore chapter. The FNAF spin-offs, often dismissed as non-canon, contain their own hidden details. FNAF World includes attacks with mismatched descriptions. For example, Cosmic Song is labeled as a buff when it is actually a damage move, and Bad Pizza is categorized as poison despite lacking any poison effect. These strange mislabels add to the game's reputation as chaotic, unfinished, and filled with odd design quirks. Even Pizzeria Simulator has its share of peculiarities. While most animatronics are relatively cheap to acquire, Funtime Chica costs an enormous $72,000, making her the single most expensive purchase in the game. The reason for her inflated cost has never been explained, but it makes her stand out in a game where every detail tends to carry symbolic weight. The lore itself has seeped into real-world nods. Scott Cawthon once launched a Kickstarter for the original FNAF, with a goal of $10,000 and tiers for wallpapers, early copies, and beta testing access. After only 3 days, he cancelled it, leaving the campaign with 0 pledges. While some see this as a failure, others interpret it as Scott deciding to rely entirely on word of mouth, which ultimately turned out to be one of the smartest decisions in indie game history. Even the books contain nods that hint back to the games. In the Freddy files, the withered animatronics were originally just called old animatronics by the fandom. The name withered only became official years later when Scott canonized it in print. It's a reminder that fan terminology often fills the gaps until the official word arrives, shaping the way the series is discussed. Throughout the franchise, one recurring Easter egg brings a brief touch of humor. Clicking Freddy's nose, whether on a poster, plush, or menu screen, always triggers a playful honk. It began in the very first game as a small joke, but it's carried into nearly every entry since, becoming a tradition that players still check for in every new release. And then there are the strange inspirations from real-world media. Freddy's infamous jump scare scream isn't original to the series at all. It comes from a 1981 British sci-fi horror film called Inseminoid, specifically from a scene of childbirth. The sound was sped up and distorted, giving it a shrill, unnatural quality. While fans interpret it as the souls of children crying out, its real origin adds a bizarre layer to one of the game's most iconic sounds. Security Breach, the most recent mainline game, carries Easter eggs of its own. In one of the earliest teasers for Glamrock Freddy, fans who checked the page's source code discovered the phrase "Shadow of Vanny" the first time her name was confirmed. Another teaser included hidden text of a conversation that read, "Stay the course. I will. Focus on my voice. I will." While it seemed to describe Vanny's corruption by Glitch Trap, some players now believe the conversation may have involved the Glamrock animatronics themselves. The FNAF franchise is filled with these oddities: unused music, mismatched files, background details only visible when brightened, and cryptic messages tucked into teaser pages. None of them are essential to gameplay, but together they form the foundation of what makes the series so fascinating. It's not just about surviving until 6 a.m. It's about piecing together fragments of a story hidden in plain sight. Among the details that often go unnoticed is how the original posters scattered throughout the pizzerias can change under very rare conditions. In the first game, some of these shifts are simple, like altered expressions on Freddy's face, but others are far darker. Occasionally, they transform into crude sketches of crying children, styled in a way that resembles The Scream by Edvard Munch. This eerie imagery links directly to the puppet, whose design carries the same wide, hollow eyes and streaks of tears. The puppet itself remains one of the most mysterious figures in the franchise. In-game, it acts as a guardian, punishing neglect, but the files suggest its story is much older. Early concept notes pointed to the puppet being inspired by Japanese no-theatre masks, designed to show sorrow from every angle. While this idea never made it into official canon, the resemblance explains why its expression always feels unsettling, no matter how you view it. The series' tradition of hiding secrets in the source code of teaser websites is another hallmark. Before Sister Location's release, players who inspected the code discovered abbreviations like ARI, CPW, and CI. These were later understood as Afton Robotics Inc., Chica's Party World, and Criminal Institute. The first pointed directly to William Afton's company. The second hinted at a planned location for Funtime Chica. And the third, the Criminal Institute, remains unexplained, sparking endless theories about experiments that may have tied into Afton's obsession with immortality. Even seemingly minor characters can hide strange trivia. Helpy, the cheerful mascot from Pizzeria Simulator, appears briefly in Help Wanted as an Easter egg. He can materialize behind the monitor in the hub, or even behind the player in FNAF 2 mode, remaining perfectly still until the scene changes. His harmless, silent presence adds to the uncanny atmosphere, especially since he was never designed to be threatening. Some animatronics, however, hide contradictions within their own identities. Funtime Foxy is one of the clearest examples. In Sister Location, Hand Unit refers to Funtime Foxy as she, while another voice refers to the character as he. Scott Cawthon himself avoided clarification, and when asked directly, once replied with a simple yes. Whether intended as a joke or a deeper implication of a genderless design, the ambiguity has become a defining part of the character's identity. Balloon Boy also carries his own unusual gaps in the lore. Despite being a core antagonist in the second game, he is never mentioned by Phone Guy, nor does he appear in any of the death minigames. For a time, players theorized that Balloon Boy might be a hallucination. Later appearances in spin-offs and sequels debunked that idea, but it remains curious that he was excluded from all supporting material in the game where he first appeared. FNAF World, though light-hearted, also contains eerie leftovers. Among them is unused music titled Ice Cave. While a battle theme eventually made its way into the final game, this second piece suggested an entire scrapped area, likely themed after frozen caverns. Files referencing the area still exist, proving that entire zones were cut before release, leaving only fragments behind. Another strange artifact comes from Nightmare Balloon Boy. During his appearances, his head floats slightly apart from his jaw, seemingly disconnected. But in one single frame of the Fun with Balloon Boy minigame, two cylinders briefly appear, connecting the head and jaw as if the developers experimented with different designs before settling on the floating version. The more fans dug into textures and files, the more secrets emerged. In Sister Location, for example, there is an unused render of Ballora peering directly through the primary control module window, her faceplates wide open. It was most likely intended for one of her shock sequences, but scrapped before the final build. Seeing her model lit up in that context makes her even more unnerving, as if she had been meant to confront the player more directly. The phrase "it's me" is another recurring thread woven throughout the series. It first appeared as a hallucination in the original game, flashing across the screen in sudden bursts, but it later showed up in the sequel's cutscenes, in minigame graffiti, and even in spin-offs like FNAF World. In Curse of Dreadbear, darting all three clown posters in the prize barn sometimes makes "It's Me" appear on the banners, a playful but chilling callback to the earliest mysteries. Glitchtrap, one of the newer antagonists, also has a peculiar naming history. While his official title is Glitchtrap, files in Help Wanted also refer to him as Malhair, a fan nickname that the developers eventually adopted. This makes him one of the only characters in the franchise with two names considered equally valid, blurring the line between canon and fan interpretation. Even longtime staples like Foxy carry secrets. On rare occasions in the first game, if you check Pirate's Cove, you may hear a faint pirate song being sung. The tune grows louder as you focus on the camera, confirming that Foxy himself is singing. It doesn't change his behavior in any way, but it adds another layer of personality to a character often remembered only for his charges down the hallway. In Special Delivery, animatronic conditions were meant to degrade during fights, their suits becoming more worn and cracked as the encounter dragged on. But certain skins behave differently. Freddy Frostbear and Radioactive Foxy remain pristine until the very end, while Black Ice Frostbear, despite being a skin of Frostbear, does actually take damage over time. These small inconsistencies are rarely noticed unless players examine the game frame by frame. Sometimes even the smallest decorative details are meaningful. In Nightmare Fredbear's design, his extra menu render shows him with one white button and one black button. But in gameplay, both buttons appear black. Whether this is a lighting trick or an intentional design quirk, it has never been clarified. Help Wanted later restored the mismatch, giving him the uneven buttons once again. And in Ultimate Custom Night, even the weakest characters were given mechanics. Trash and the Gang, for example, are described with 3 question marks instead of actual rules. Their behavior is simple and non-threatening, but this description style makes them appear oddly mysterious, almost as if something more was hidden behind their existence. Ain's sight. In Sister Location, the blueprints for the Funtime animatronics reveal more than just their mechanical parts. If you brighten the schematics, faint text appears along the edges that reference Afton Robotics directly, as well as project tags that never appear in the story. This gave fans the first real confirmation that the company itself was more important to the lore than any single pizzeria, and that William Afton's experiments stretched far deeper underground. One of the strangest details buried in the second game is the rare appearance of Shadow Bonnie. Known to players as RBQFS VASXC, his file name alone became a community puzzle. But the more obscure detail is that Shadow Bonnie's model isn't a new character at all. It's literally Toy Bonnie's textures turned pitch black with a light distortion effect applied. The decision to reuse Toy Bonnie's body only made the hallucination more unsettling, because it suggested this shadow was more like a corruption than an entirely separate being. Meanwhile, in FNAF 4, sound design plays just as big a role as visuals. Players know to listen for breathing at the doors, but in very rare cases, a soft metallic scraping sound can be heard even when no animatronic is nearby. Dataminers later found that this was an unused audio trigger left in the files, most likely tied to Nightmare Foxy. Though not intended to activate, it gave players a fleeting sense that the house itself was alive, reinforcing the dreamlike horror of the game. In Help Wanted, a subtle Easter egg involves Glitchtrap's idle animations. If you leave the headset on without progressing for long enough, his looping hand gestures begin to change slightly, sometimes waving, sometimes beckoning more urgently, sometimes freezing mid-motion. These minor differences are so infrequent that most players never catch them, but they quietly hint at Glitchtrap's growing awareness of the player across the VR sessions. Even the first game has tiny secrets tied to its posters. Everyone remembers the chance of Golden Freddy appearing in the West Hall corner, but a much less documented quirk is that Freddy's regular poster occasionally shows slight texture glitches, a flicker of teeth or a warped jaw, without ever triggering Golden Freddy. This means there are visual hints that the animatronics are corrupted long before the game gives you its infamous crash. And in Pizzeria Simulator, the salvage minigames are already tense enough, but one tiny unused asset in the files suggests they could have been even more unforgiving. An alternate salvage paper exists where the instructions are written in slightly different wording, ending with the line, "Do not trust what you hear." It was never used in the game, but its presence reinforces the theme that audio cues can be manipulated, and not every sound in the Fazbear world is to be trusted. In Ultimate Custom Night, there's a rare visual oddity tied to Rockstar Freddy. Normally, he simply demands his payment of Fazcoins, but on very rare occasions, his eye textures shift slightly out of place, as if misaligned. Most assume it's just a bug, but others see it as a deliberate Easter egg, hinting that even the more comedic animatronics hide fragments of the same ghostly possession as the originals. Over in Security Breach, if you visit Rockstar Row before triggering any of the main events, you can sometimes hear muffled cheering behind closed doors. It doesn't correspond to any scripted moment in the game, leading many to believe it's recycled crowd audio from an unused cutscene. The odd placement gives the unsettling impression that unseen guests are still watching the animatronics perform, even in the abandoned mall. FNAF world, despite its lighter tone, is full of eerie leftovers from the main series. One of the strangest is an unused enemy sprite labelled Proto Fredbear, which appears slightly melted and distorted compared to the final version. Fans speculate that it was meant to be part of a darker side quest, but its presence in such a cheerful game made it even more disturbing to discover. In Sister Location's Custom Night, Funtime Foxy's stages are already unpredictable, but if you brighten the cameras, you can sometimes see faint shapes on the walls that look like handprints. These were never acknowledged by Scott and may just be compression artifacts, but the placement is so specific, always near the doors, that many believe they were meant to imply trapped technicians desperately trying to escape. And in the third game, Springtrap's idle animations contain one of the most subtle touches of all. If you watch closely, his head occasionally twitches in a way that resembles someone adjusting a mask. It's a fleeting detail, but considering William Afton is literally trapped inside the suit, this twitch gives away that the man within is still conscious, a horrifying reminder that he hasn't truly died. Even merchandise sometimes contains secrets. One official Freddy Fazbear plush from early promotions had a tag that included the words Phase 1. The phrasing never appeared anywhere else in canon, but it led to endless speculation that Fazbear Entertainment saw the pizzerias as just the first step in a much larger plan. Whether intentional lore or simply a marketing choice, it fit perfectly into the atmosphere of a company always hiding more than it revealed. In the second game, the prize corner is remembered for its music box mechanic, but if you listen closely to the winding noise, there are subtle variations in the pitch. These aren't random. The files actually include 3 slightly different versions of the winding sound. Most players never noticed in the middle of the chaos, but the difference adds a subconscious unease, as if even the safety of winding the box wasn't perfectly stable. Security Breach's Pizzaplex is full of background details, but one of the most unsettling involves the staff bots. Everyone knows they perform basic cleaning and ushering, but if you follow one long enough, you'll notice that they sometimes turn their heads a little too far toward the camera, almost breaking their routine. Data miners later confirmed these animations were left unused in most builds, but their presence hints that the staff bots were designed to be more aware of players than they appear. In the original Five Nights at Freddy's, the Power Out sequence is terrifying for its sudden silence, but what's less talked about is that the flickering lights sometimes reveal faint shapes in the hall. They last for less than a second, too quick to register during gameplay, but frame captures show blurred animatronic outlines, as if Freddy isn't the only one waiting for the blackout. Whether this was a glitch or a deliberate scare, it deepened the sense that unseen figures stalk the player in those final powerless moments. During Sister Location's main campaign, Circus Baby's dialogue feels rehearsed, but a handful of her lines have audio anomalies baked into the file. Subtle echoes and distortions that don't appear anywhere else. Theories suggest these glitches were Scott's way of implying her dual nature, both a machine following orders and a vessel for Elizabeth's spirit struggling to break through. FNAF 4's minigames are simple pixel art, but their atmosphere comes from the sound design. A detail often missed is that the crying child's footsteps change pitch when he approaches Fredbear's diner, dropping slightly lower than in other environments. This is such a small change, but it makes the approach feel heavier, like the game itself knows something tragic is about to occur. In Help Wanted, the vent repair stage with Mangle is infamous for its difficulty. What most players don't realize is that the wires blocking your view are randomized from a pool of different placements. That means no two runs are exactly alike, ensuring that Mangle's jump scares are unpredictable. This randomness wasn't just for gameplay. It also echoes the lore of Mangle as a constantly broken and reassembled figure, never quite the same twice. Pizzeria Simulator hides one of the more chilling Easter eggs in its salvage minigames. Very rarely, when playing one of the audio cues to trigger movement, you can hear a second faint voice layered underneath the main sound. It's distorted beyond recognition, but fans have speculated it could be a child's plea hidden in the signal, adding another layer of horror to the already tense process of capturing an animatronic. The third game has a unique connection to the series' meta-lore. When Fazbear's fright burns at the end, the newspaper image can be brightened to reveal Springtrap's shadow behind the debris. But something else lurks in that same newspaper: blurred lines of text about the development of the game itself. Scott hid fragments of his real production notes in the article, blurring the line between story and reality, and turning the newspaper into both an in-universe update and a developer's diary. One of the strangest pieces of cut content appears in FNAF World. Hidden sprites show unused versions of adventure characters with exaggerated features, including a stretched-out Bonnie with unusually long arms. While some chalk this up to experimentation with sprite design, others believe it may have been part of the dark teasers Scott briefly uploaded before quickly removing them. If true, it means World once had a far creepier tone before its release. Security Breach's arcade machines are more than set dressing. One of the arcade cabinets, Fazcad, includes a scrolling background that features pixelated versions of animatronics not present in the main game. Players spotted what looks like a primitive version of Sun and Moon long before their final models were revealed, suggesting that the arcade sprites may have been built from early concept art. This makes the arcade a time capsule of Pizzaplex design history. In sister location, the blueprints for the Funtime animatronics reveal more than just their mechanical parts. If you brighten the schematics, faint text appears along the edges that reference Afton Robotics directly, as well as project tags that never appear in the story. This gave fans the first real confirmation that the company itself was more important to the lore than any single pizzeria, and that William Afton's experiments stretched far deeper underground. One of the strangest details buried in the second game is the rare appearance of Shadow Bonnie. Known to players as RWQFSFASXC, his file name alone became a community puzzle. But the more obscure detail is that Shadow Bonnie's model isn't a new character at all. It's literally Toy Bonnie's textures turned pitch black, with a light distortion effect applied. The decision to reuse Toy Bonnie's body only made the hallucination more unsettling, because it suggested this shadow was more like a corruption than an entirely separate being. Meanwhile, in FNAF 4, sound design plays just as big a role as visuals. Players know to listen for breathing at the doors, but in very rare cases, a soft metallic scraping sound can be heard, even when no animatronic is nearby. Data miners later found that this was an unused audio trigger left in the files, most likely tied to Nightmare Foxy. Though not intended to activate, it gave players a fleeting sense that the house itself was alive, reinforcing the dreamlike horror of the game. In Help Wanted, a subtle Easter egg involves Glitchtrap's idle animations. If you leave the headset on without progressing for long enough, his looping hand gestures begin to change slightly, sometimes waving, sometimes beckoning more urgently, sometimes freezing mid-motion. These minor differences are so infrequent that most players never catch them, but they quietly hint at Glitchtrap's growing awareness of the player across the VR sessions. Even the first game has tiny secrets tied to its posters. Everyone remembers the chance of Golden Freddy appearing in the West Hall corner, but a much less documented quirk is that Freddy's regular poster occasionally shows slight texture glitches, a flicker of teeth or a warped jaw, without ever triggering Golden Freddy. This means there are visual hints that the animatronics are corrupted long before the game gives you its infamous crash. And in Pizzeria Simulator, The salvage minigames are already tense enough, but one tiny unused asset in the files suggests they could have been even more unforgiving. An alternate salvage paper exists where the instructions are written in slightly different wording, ending with the line, "Do not trust what you hear." It was never used in the game, but its presence reinforces the theme that audio cues can be manipulated, and not every sound in the Fazbear world is to be trusted. In Ultimate Custom Night, there's a rare visual oddity tied to Rockstar Freddy. Normally he simply demands his payment of Faz coins, but on very rare occasions, his eye textures shift slightly out of place, as if misaligned. Most assume it's just a bug, but others see it as a deliberate Easter egg, hinting that even the more comedic animatronics hide fragments of the same ghostly possession as the originals. Over in Security Breach, if you visit Rockstar Row before triggering any of the main events, you can sometimes hear muffled cheering behind closed doors. It doesn't correspond to any scripted moment in the game, leading many to believe it's recycled crowd audio from an unused cutscene. The odd placement gives the unsettling impression that unseen guests are still watching the animatronics perform. Even in the abandoned mall, FNAF world, despite its lighter tone, is full of eerie leftovers from the main series. One of the strangest is an unused enemy sprite labelled Proto-Fredbear, which appears slightly melted and distorted compared to the final version. Fans speculate that it was meant to be part of a darker side quest, but its presence in such a cheerful game made it even more disturbing to discover. In Sister Location's Custom Night, Funtime Foxy's stages are already unpredictable, but if you brighten the cameras, you can sometimes see faint shapes on the walls that look like handprints. These were never acknowledged by Scott, and may just be compression artifacts, but the placement is so specific, always near the doors, that many believe they were meant to imply trapped technicians desperately trying to escape. And in the third game, Springtrap's idle animations contain one of the most subtle touches of all. If you watch closely, his head occasionally twitches in a way that resembles someone adjusting a mask. It's a fleeting detail, but considering William Afton is literally trapped inside the suit, this twitch gives away that the man within is still conscious, a horrifying reminder that he hasn't truly died. Even merchandise sometimes contains secrets. One official Freddy Fazbear plush from early promotions had a tag that included the words Phase 1. The phrasing never appeared anywhere else in canon, but it led to endless speculation that Fazbear Entertainment saw the pizzerias as just the first step in a much larger plan. Whether intentional lore or simply a marketing choice, it fit perfectly into the atmosphere of a company always hiding more than it revealed. In the second game, the prize corner is remembered for its music box mechanic, but if you listen closely to the winding noise, there are subtle variations in the pitch. These aren't random. The files actually include 3 slightly different versions of the winding sound. Most players never noticed in the middle of the chaos, but the difference adds a subconscious unease, as if even the safety of winding the box wasn't perfectly stable. Security Breach's Pizzaplex is full of background details, but one of the most unsettling involves the staff bots. Everyone knows they perform basic cleaning and ushering, but if you follow one long enough, you'll notice that they sometimes turn their heads a little too far toward the camera, almost breaking their routine. Data miners later confirmed these animations were left unused in most builds, but their presence hints that the staff bots were designed to be more aware of players than they appear. In the original Five Nights at Freddy's, the power-out sequence is terrifying for its sudden silence, but what's less talked about is that the flickering lights sometimes reveal faint shapes in the hall. They last for less than a second, too quick to register during gameplay, but frame captures show blurred animatronic outlines, as if Freddy isn't the only one waiting for the blackout. Whether this was a glitch or a deliberate scare, it deepened the sense that unseen figures stalk the player in those final powerless moments. During Sister Location's main campaign, Circus Baby's dialogue feels rehearsed, but a handful of her lines have audio anomalies baked into the file. Subtle echoes and distortions that don't appear anywhere else. Theories suggest these glitches were Scott's way of implying her dual nature, both a machine following orders and a vessel for Elizabeth's spirit struggling to break through. FNAF 4's minigames are simple pixel art, but their atmosphere comes from the sound design. A detail often missed is that the crying child's footsteps change pitch when he approaches Fredbear's diner, dropping slightly lower than in other environments. This is such a small change, but it makes the approach feel heavier, like the game itself knows something tragic is about to occur. In Help Wanted, the vent repair stage with Mangle is infamous for its difficulty. What most players don't realize is that the wires blocking your view are randomized from a pool of different placements. That means no two runs are exactly alike, ensuring that Mangle's jump scares are unpredictable. This randomness wasn't just for gameplay. It also echoes the lore of Mangle as a constantly broken and reassembled figure, never quite the same twice. Pizzeria Simulator hides one of the more chilling Easter eggs in its salvage minigames. Very rarely, when playing one of the audio cues to trigger movement, you can hear a second faint voice layered underneath the main sound. It's distorted beyond recognition, but fans have speculated it could be a child's plea hidden in the signal, adding another layer of horror to the already tense process of capturing an animatronic. The third game has a unique connection to the series' meta-lore. When Fazbear's Fright burns at the end, the newspaper image can be brightened to reveal Springtrap's shadow behind the debris. But something else lurks in that same newspaper. Blurred lines of text about the development of the game itself. Scott hid fragments of his real production notes in the article, blurring the line between story and reality, and turning the newspaper into both an in-universe update and a developer's diary. One of the strangest pieces of cut content appears in FNAF World. Hidden sprites show unused versions of adventure characters with exaggerated features, including a stretched-out Bonnie with unusually long arms. While some chalk this up to experimentation with sprite design, others believe it may have been part of the dark teasers Scott briefly uploaded before quickly removing them. If true, it means World once had a far creepier tone before its release. Security breaches arcade machines are more than set dressing. One of the arcade cabinets, Fazcard, includes a scrolling background that features pixelated versions of animatronics not present in the main game. Players spotted what looks like a primitive version of Sun and Moon long before their final models were revealed, suggesting that the arcade sprites may have been built from early concept art. This makes the arcade a time capsule of Pizzaplex design history. In Ultimate Custom Night, even the weakest characters were given mechanics. Trash and the gang, for example, are described with 3 question marks instead of any actual rules. Their behavior is simple and non-threatening, but the strange description makes them feel oddly mysterious, almost as if there's something more hidden behind their existence. Moving into Sister Location, Ballora has always stood out for her closed eyes and graceful movement. But if you study her blueprint in the Extras menu, it shows internal sensors meant for audio detection. This has led fans to wonder, if she doesn't open her eyes, how is she able to find you in the private room? The implication is that she might have more awareness than her programming suggests, a chilling detail that fits her haunting performances. One of the stranger quirks comes from Withered Bonnie. When he leaves the parts and service room in FNAF 2, Withered Chica can be seen leaning further forward, almost as if he accidentally bumped into her on the way out. Whether it was intentional animation or just a mistake, players interpreted it as a subtle glimpse of the animatronics interacting with one another behind the scenes. Another detail hides in the sound design. In FNAF 1, when Chica or Bonnie are just outside your office, you can sometimes hear labored breathing. On extremely rare occasions, though, Bonnie will actually let out a groan even before stepping into the doorway. The sound is so uncommon that some players believed it was a glitch, but it adds to the sense that these animatronics have lives of their own, just beyond your view. In Help Wanted's FNAF 1 Recreation, Checking outside the left doorway can sometimes trigger Foxy to sprint down the hall. If you're fast enough, you can close the door just before he reaches you. It's a tense moment that many players miss, but it rewards those who act on instinct and timing, staying true to the series' theme of high-stakes observation. Security Breach also carries its share of subtle environmental storytelling. In one of the shops, there's a poster advertising Monty's Mystery Mix, a treat meant for kids. But players later discover that the mix is used as a trap to lure Chica into the compactor during the escape sequence. What looks like simple kid-friendly branding early on turns into a tool for survival, a clever way the game foreshadows its mechanics. Not all curiosities are hidden in gameplay. Some are tucked away in rare promotional material. A beta render of Glamrock Freddy shows him with darker shading and sharper teeth, making him appear far more menacing than in the final release. This unfinished version circulated in early marketing screenshots and has since become a favorite what if for fans imagining a scarier security breach. And in FNAF World, an unused debug message references a mechanic called Happy Jam 3. Only 2 Happy Jam abilities were ever implemented, but the presence of a third suggests Scott once planned to push the move set further. It's a small leftover, but it reminds us that the game's development was larger than what players finally received. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, Springtrap has several rare idle animations that only appear if you watch him for long stretches of time. In one, he twitches his head unnaturally fast, while in another, his entire body seems to lurch forward before snapping back. These animations are so uncommon that many players never saw them during regular gameplay, but they add to his unsettling presence as something far more unpredictable than the other animatronics. The minigames across the series hide layers of lore in small details. In the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame of FNAF 2, if you pay attention to the very last frame, a 5th child briefly appears before Golden Freddy attacks. This tiny flicker of imagery connects directly to Cassidy, the spirit many believe to be one of the most powerful forces in the franchise, showing how even a single frame can carry heavy implications for the story. Ultimate Custom Night is known for its overwhelming roster, but hidden in its files are voice lines that were never used. For example, Fredbear has heavily distorted dialogue that, when cleaned up, includes phrases like, "There was more fantasy and fun where I came from," and "Let's find a suit that's right for you." These aren't just eerie fragments. They tie directly back to Phone Guy's first greeting in FNAF 1 and the old explanations of Springlock suits, creating a chilling sense of continuity across the games. Another overlooked secret comes from the soundscape of FNAF 4. On rare occasions, when you're listening for breathing at the door, you can hear the faint clattering of pots and pans. This sound only occurs when Nightmare Chica is present in the far right hall, subtly tying back to her kitchen behavior in the original game. It's a detail that most players miss, but it cleverly reinforces continuity between 2 very different installments. The "it's me" phrase is one of the most persistent mysteries in the series, but beyond posters and hallucinations, it shows up in more playful places. In Curse of Dreadbear, if you manage to throw darts at 3 specific clown posters in the barn, banners briefly flash the words, "It's me." The callback is never explained, but it's a reminder of how deeply the phrase is embedded into FNAF's identity. Even in side content, Toy Freddy in FNAF 2 has a small detail that often goes unnoticed. When he moves through the party rooms, his eyes occasionally shift in different directions, creating a subtle, lazy eye effect. It doesn't impact gameplay at all, but the strange movement makes him look even more unsettling, as if he's not fully aware of his own body. This tiny quirk has been spotted in renders and gameplay footage alike, showing how much personality the animators gave each character. Sister Location's private room is already filled with Easter eggs, but one of the rarest involves the keypad. By entering 19 to 8 to 3, you unlock images from FNAF 4's bedroom and Plushtrap's hallway. This isn't just a throwaway reference. It heavily implies that the nightmarish events of FNAF 4 were not simply dreams or hallucinations, but tied directly into the reality of the series. Fans still debate what this means for the crying child, but the inclusion shows how Scott linked different games through hidden codes. Security Breach, despite being much larger than earlier titles, still carries subtle secrets. In Monty's Gator Golf, one of the arcade cabinets features a golf ball that briefly flashes with a pixelated image of Bonnie. This is one of the only references to Bonnie's disappearance, hinting at his fate long before the game's story confirms that Monty replaced him. The fact that it's so easy to miss makes it one of the cleverer examples of hidden storytelling in the game. Rare render mistakes can sometimes spark theories. Phantom Balloon Boy in Help Wanted appears without a nose or legs in his main model, giving him a half-finished look. However, hidden in the game's files is a complete render of him, with his missing pieces included. This suggests his altered appearance may have been intentional to make him more ghost-like, turning what could have been a development oversight into something meaningful for his design. In FNAF World, Scott Cawthon included countless playful references to his own career. One enemy, called Scott's Head, literally uses the developer's face as an attack. During one sequence, the head jokes about sequels like Freddy in Space or Cupcake Takes Manhattan, which at the time seemed like pure comedy. But years later, Freddy in Space 2 became a real minigame, proving that even his jokes sometimes foreshadowed real projects. The Freddy nose honk is one of the series' longest-running Easter eggs. First introduced on the poster in FNAF 1, it carried over into plushies, models, and even menu icons across almost every main entry. What's interesting is that in certain games, the honk sound effect is slightly different, as if Scott intentionally varied the pitch or recording. The consistency of the Easter egg mixed with small variations shows his attention to even the tiniest running jokes. The books tied to the franchise have their own curiosities. The Freddy Files, updated edition, was heavily criticized for accidentally using fan renders and misinformation about Ultimate Custom Night. Scott and Scholastic later corrected the digital edition, but one error, Springtrap's head being shown in Scraptrap's place, was never fixed. Fans now see it as a strange relic of how official material can sometimes be just as mysterious as the games themselves. FNAF 3 hides another rarely discussed secret. During the ending newspaper scene after Night 6, brightening the page reveals Springtrap peering from the shadows, watching the Freddy bobblehead. It's one of the earliest visual confirmations that he survived the fire, and it also sets the stage for his return in later games. Without brightening the image, most players would never know he was there, making it one of the series' more clever hidden details. Even the origins of Freddy's laugh have their own story. The sound is actually a slowed-down recording of a little girl's laugh. In the games, it comes across as low and menacing, but when sped back up, you can clearly hear the childlike tone. Many fans have taken this as symbolic of the murdered children haunting the animatronics, turning a simple sound effect into a chilling piece of lore. Not every secret comes from gameplay. Some were hidden on Scott's website. At one point, if you brightened the teaser images for Sister Location, you could find words like Afton Robotics Inc. and Chica's Party World. Some of these eventually became part of canon, but others, like Criminal Institute, were never explained, suggesting abandoned storylines. These mysterious phrases continue to fuel theories even today. When you look closely at the background of FNAF 2's prize corner, you can see faint scribbles and drawings on the walls that are never mentioned. Some of these sketches depict balloons, cupcakes, and odd shapes, but one resembles a crude sketch of Spring Bonnie. The detail is so faded that most players overlook it. Yet it might be one of the earliest visual nods toward William Afton's murderous alter ego. The puppet, often associated with tragedy and grief, has its own secrets in the game files. In FNAF 2, there is a scrapped mechanic where the puppet could appear in the hallway, not just in the prize corner. This was cut before release, but the code suggests that the puppet was originally meant to be a far more direct threat, moving like the other animatronics. Its role was streamlined to the music box instead, making it a unique guardian spirit rather than another roaming attacker. In Help Wanted, if you examine the props scattered around Fazbear's hub, one arcade machine flickers in a way that reveals a faint outline of Springtrap. The image lasts less than a second, and it doesn't affect gameplay, but it adds to the idea that Glitchtrap and Springtrap are intertwined. The arcade cabinet itself is never playable, yet its existence adds one more layer of unease to the digital landscape. The early development of Sister Location left behind several odd assets. Among them is a strange image of Ballora, seen through the primary control module window with her faceplates fully open. The area around her is brightly lit, which never happens in the final game. Many believe this was going to be a shock scare moment if players hesitated before delivering a controlled shock. But it was abandoned, leaving Ballora's eerie stare locked away in the files. Even Freddy himself has peculiar traits that are rarely talked about. In FNAF 1, if you lose power and the office goes dark, Freddy plays his Toreador march before attacking. What isn't often mentioned is that the song plays at random points in its melody. Sometimes it starts from the beginning, other times from the middle, giving each encounter a slightly different timing. This unpredictability makes the final seconds before the attack feel even more stressful. Security Breach features hundreds of posters across the Pizzaplex, but one of the rarest is hidden deep in the staff-only areas. It shows a cartoony version of Vanny holding a balloon, with faint static lines running across her figure. The poster is difficult to see without brightening the textures, but it strongly suggests the developers intended to blend her digital glitch persona with her real-world image, creating a subtle crossover between Vanny and Glitchtrap. The mini-arenas in Sister Location are typically background threats, yet in the custom night, there's a chance for one to briefly peek into the doorways of darkroom stages when you least expect it. Their appearance is almost pointless from a gameplay perspective, but it's one of those strange details that reinforces the sense that you're never truly alone, even in areas where you feel safe. Several newspaper clippings hidden across FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 provide lore that most players miss. In the East Hall corner of the first game, the safety sign sometimes changes to articles about the 1985 location. These articles reference the missing children incident and public health complaints. What's particularly fascinating is how one clipping mentions that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza will close by year's end, foreshadowing the fate of the pizzeria you're standing in. It connects gameplay with the looming doom of the business itself. Rare assets in FNAF World suggest a scrapped icy level, supported by the unused track Ice Cave. This would have been one of the few times an elemental theme was fully integrated into the franchise, outside of skins in special delivery. The track remains one of the fandom's favourite examples of what could have been, since the music is polished enough to suggest the area was nearly complete before being cut. Phantom animatronics in FNAF 3 don't always behave the way fans think. For example, Phantom Foxy's jump scare is usually tied to your monitor, but there's a slim chance he can attack the moment you load into a night. This extremely rare event lasts only seconds, but it demonstrates how the game's scare system was designed to always keep players on edge, even when the night had barely begun. Scott Cawthon's websites were legendary for hiding cryptic secrets. One of the strangest occurred during the teasers for Sister Location, where hidden text lines included abbreviations like CRI. Fans speculated it stood for Criminal Institute, though it never appeared in any game. Theories suggest it may have been an abandoned idea for another often-linked facility, one that might have experimented with animatronics outside of entertainment venues. The leftover text has become a puzzle piece, with no clear place to fit. Glitchtrap, unlike most characters, is canonically referred to by two names. While his official title is Glitchtrap, the fan nickname Malhair was later acknowledged by Steel Wool Studios as legitimate. It's one of the rare moments where the boundary between fan creation and canon blurred, showing how influential the community can be on shaping the franchise. Rare mistakes often become lore fuel. Withered Chica's model in Help Wanted shows faint stains across her suit that resemble dried blood. While many assume this is just a texturing quirk, fans interpret it as evidence of the decaying corpse within. It's a reminder that in the FNAF universe, what looks like a simple design choice may have darker meaning when considered through the lens of possession and remnant. The sound design across the series often hides secrets. Balloon Boy is known for his laughter, but in some versions of FNAF 2, his audio files include distorted garbling that never plays in normal gameplay. It's unclear whether these were scrapped voice lines or corrupted data, but it adds to the argument that Balloon Boy may have been a late addition to the game's cast. In Curse of Dreadbear, flipping the blacklight switch in the main hub and pressing a hidden button reveals Glitchtrap dancing on the hills in the distance. The animation is a callback to his credits dance, placed as a reward for curious players who explore the hub thoroughly. It's not tied to lore, but it reflects the playful side of Scott's Easter egg philosophy, where silliness exists alongside terror. Freddy Frostbear is notable for being the first major seasonal skin in special delivery, yet his behavior is unique. Unlike most animatronics, his condition doesn't visibly degrade during a fight. Strangely, his Recolor Black Ice Frostbear does show damage over time, even though he's technically just a skin. This inconsistency may be an oversight, but some fans argue it was intentional to give Frostbear a more magical, invulnerable feel. The infamous scream used in FNAF 1's jump scares has its roots in a 1981 sci-fi horror film called Inseminoid. The sound came from a scene involving the birth of an alien, but slowed and distorted. It became the signature shriek of Freddy and the others. Fans often assume it's the scream of the haunted children, but in reality, it's a piece of stock audio with a far stranger origin. Nightmare Mangle's render in FNAF 4 shows her hanging from the ceiling in the teaser image, but she never performs this action in gameplay. This has led to speculation that her mechanics were altered late in development, perhaps to simplify her behavior. Fans have suggested she may have been intended to drop from the ceiling mid-hallway, making her more threatening, but that concept was abandoned before release. The animatronic's shadows sometimes reveal secrets too. In Sister Location's custom night, if you watch closely, Bonbon's shadow appears on the wall in certain camera angles, even when he's technically out of view. It's a minor touch, but it shows how much detail was put into reinforcing the idea that these characters exist within the environment. Even when the player can't fully see them, even the marketing of FNAF hides curiosities. During FNAF 3's promotion, the teaser with Springtrap included faint letters in Scott's Steam announcement. Compiling them, spelled out, "My name is Springtrap." This was one of the earliest official confirmations of his name, hidden not in the game itself, but in promotional material. It's a clever example of Scott using real-world clues to expand the lore. FNAF 2's mobile version contained odd downgrades, such as Toy Bonnie not appearing in certain rooms and Toy Freddy being absent from others. These cuts were likely technical limitations of the hardware, but they created confusion for mobile-only players who didn't realize they were missing content. To this day, some fans who grew up on mobile ports have slightly different memories of the game compared to PC players. Perhaps one of the strangest coincidences is that Michael Afton's Shadow in Sister Location's ending was created using a blacked-out photo of Rick Astley. While most players never noticed, those who brightened the image discovered the Easter egg, turning it into one of the funniest and most unexpected crossovers between pop culture and FNAF. Ultimate Custom Night includes details that most players overlook, like Happy Frog being immune to the heater. This is based on the real biology of frogs as cold-blooded animals, meaning they don't regulate their body temperature internally. It's a simple nod to real science, but it also shows how even silly mechanics in the game can carry hidden logic. In the original Five Nights at Freddy's, Bonnie's mechanics were slightly different during development. Early code suggested that he might have been able to enter from both doors, rather than only the left. This was likely cut to prevent overlap with Chica, but it shows how fluid the animatronic's behavior was during early balancing. One of the most chilling details in FNAF 2 comes from the minigames. In the Give Gifts, Give Life sequence, after 4 children are revived, a 5th child flashes for a single frame before Golden Freddy's jump scare. This detail strongly connects to Cassidy, one of the 2 spirits said to be bound to Golden Freddy. It's a tiny moment, but it cements Golden Freddy's unique role in the franchise's lore. Security Breach's daycare posters feature not just colourful art of sun and moon, but subtle decay. On one poster, the paper is cracked in the corner, as if corruption itself is bleeding into the cheerful artwork. This faint imperfection is believed to foreshadow the split personality of Sun and Moon, a reminder that behind every bright smile in FNAF lies a shadow waiting to emerge. The "It's me" phrase has followed the franchise from the beginning. In FNAF 1, it appears as a hallucination on posters and in text flashes. In FNAF 2, it closes out cutscenes featuring Golden Freddy. In Curse of Dreadbear, it even appears on banners if you manage to hit 3 clown posters in a row. The persistence of the phrase ties back to Golden Freddy, almost as if it's his way of reaching across every entry in the series. FNAF 3's Fazbear's Fright newspaper at the end of Night 6 includes hidden details. If you brighten the image, Springtrap can be seen in the background, staring from behind a bobblehead. Blurring the text reveals that Scott used the article to sneak in parts of his own development diary, embedding real-world history into the in-game universe. Even outside the games, the books carry unusual quirks. The Freddy Files Updated Edition was criticized for accidentally including fan renders of characters instead of official ones. Scholastic later corrected this in the digital version, but one error, a Springtrap head in place of Scraptrap, still remains, making the book a collector's curiosity in its own right. Not all cut content was hidden in code. During the teasers for FNAF World, Scott uploaded 2 darker images. One showed Adventure Mangle dangling with the caption, "See what you've all done," and another showed Ballboy with the phrase, "Madness takes many forms." Both were quickly removed, but not before fans speculated about their meaning. Some saw them as foreshadowing Mangle's suffering, while others interpreted them as reflections of Scott's own stress during development. FNAF's audio design often hides secrets. Freddy's laugh is actually a slowed-down recording of a little girl's voice. When played normally, it sounds deep and monstrous, but when restored to its original speed, the child's voice is clear. Fans interpret this as symbolic proof that Freddy is possessed by a child, even if technically it's just a stock sound effect. In Sister Location, Ballora's blueprints show that her eyes are permanently closed, yet in her jump scare, she always finds the player. The contradiction has led to speculation that she relies on something more sinister than sound, perhaps remnant or even supernatural awareness, to track her victims. The animatronics designs often contain hidden quirks. Nightmare Fredbear has mismatched buttons depending on where you see him. In gameplay, both buttons are black. In the extras menu, one is black and the other is white. Whether this was a lighting oversight or an intentional detail, it adds one more inconsistency to an already haunting character. Phantom Balloon Boy's render in Help Wanted is missing his legs and nose, even though a fully completed model exists in the files. This suggests his design was intentionally stripped down to make him appear ghostly. But since the full render was already made, some fans believe his eerie incompleteness was a late decision, designed to emphasize his phantom status. Scott's teasers for Sister Location hid another puzzle. Embedded text strings, when decoded, formed what looked like a work schedule for the Funtime animatronics, with a mysterious 5th member listed. Fans still speculate this may have been an early concept for Funtime Chica, who was absent in the game but appeared later in Pizzeria Simulator. Help Wanted's hub hides its own secrets. Brightening certain arcade machines reveals faint outlines of Springtrap, tying Glitchtrap's presence back to William Afton. The flickers are so subtle most players never notice them, yet they reinforce the idea that Springtrap haunts even digital recreations of the franchise. Ultimate Custom Night was filled with odd mechanics, Happy Frog, for example, is immune to the heater because real frogs are cold-blooded and rely on external heat to regulate their bodies. It's a simple biological nod hidden inside a horror game. Even the scrapped Kickstarter for FNAF holds strange history. Scott launched it in 2014 with a $10,000 goal, offering wallpapers and early access to backers. But after only 3 days, it was cancelled, having earned no money. Instead, the game found its success organically on platforms like Steam, bypassing crowdfunding entirely. Security breaches staff bots hide details too. Their models have different faceplates, including ones resembling Bonnie and Chica, but they're rarely seen unless examined closely. Some fans believe these were meant to connect the staff bots directly to the original animatronics, though their true purpose remains unexplained. Unused mechanics exist across the franchise. Special Delivery includes a scrapped feature called Visibility Alter, which seems to have been designed to make animatronics flicker in and out depending on distance, like phantoms. It was never activated, but if implemented, encounters could have felt even more ghostly. Nightmare's kill screen in FNAF 4 is actually a mirrored, zoomed-in version of Nightmare Fredbear's jump scare. This reuse wasn't immediately obvious, but once discovered, it demonstrated how the developers used clever editing to save resources while still producing effective scares. Even the sound of footsteps carries meaning. In FNAF 1, Chica's movement sometimes includes faint clattering of pots and pans when she's in the kitchen. In FNAF 4, when Nightmare Chica patrols the far right corner, similar sounds play, directly referencing her earliest behavior. Across all of this, a single detail remains consistent: the Freddy nose honk. From the original poster in FNAF 1 to plushies in Sister Location and menu icons in Help Wanted, it's a tiny bit of comic relief that survives every era of the franchise. Even in a world of dread, there's always a squeak of humor hidden in the darkness. And so, we've wandered through the secrets, scraps, and mysteries of Five Nights at Freddy's. From unused assets buried deep in the files, to strange details hidden in posters and teasers, each fact shows just how layered and bizarre this universe really is. Thank you so much for watching, and for spending your night with me exploring these hidden corners of FNAF's history. If you enjoyed this quiet dive into the franchise, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps more than you know. And let me ask you a question before you drift off to sleep. What's the most unsettling Easter egg you've ever found in a game? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd love to hear them. Until next time, rest well, and remember, in the world of FNAF, even the smallest detail might be hiding a story you've never noticed.